Welcome everyone to the final session of a full day symposium on disability, intersectionality, and state violence. We've had really good presentations all day, and I'm excited that we still have a nice size audience here at the end of the day for our keynote speaker, Leroy Moore. Leroy, as was said earlier today, was really the one who initiated this event. We had talked about bringing him down to give a presentation, and it's turned into this whole symposium. So I wanted to just tell you a little about who Leroy Franklin Moore Jr. is. He's the co-founder and community relations director of Sins Invalid. As a Black writer, poet, hip-hop music lover, community activist, feminist, and consultant on race and disability for the last 13 years, his work began in London, England, where he discovered a Black disabled movement, which led to the creation of his lecture series on the outskirts, race and disability. He is also producer and columnist of Illin and Chillin' at Poor Magazine and creator of Crip Hop Mixtape Project. He is one of the leading voices around disability, around police brutality and wrongful incarceration of people with disabilities, and has studied, worked, and lectured in the field of race and disability concerning blues, hip-hop, and social justice issues in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and the Netherlands. I want to also point out that his work with Sins Invalid is in the library here on campus. So if you're interested in looking more into that, we welcome you to do so. Leroy's going to present, and we'll have time at the end for questions from the audience. Thanks everyone for being here. And welcome, Leroy.
So I want to thank everybody for coming and thank the coordinators of this event. And it's a really empowering event, and I think the first of its kind. I've been on the college lecture circuit for 20 years, and I've never seen event dealing with state violence and people with disabilities. So I'm glad that it's happening here. Now I want to start today with usually I start with this PowerPoint. It's a PowerPoint with multimedia and stuff, but I want to start today with a list of suggestions that I have around police brutality and people with disabilities. I've been involved with this area since 1988, a year after high school. So I've seen things come and go. I've seen movements come and go. And the thing that I always see is that we don't have a lot of local control of our answers. So I wanted to flip that script and put some local hands in on these suggestions. And my suggestions really take it's a whole life changing, It's not only going to a hearing and coming home, and that's it. It's totally changing the whole system we live in, and changing who has power and who hasn't. So I'm gonna read these lists. Then we can open it up for a little bit of questions. Then I can go on to my presentation. I've been doing this PowerPoint, this presentation for almost a year now, And it seems to me every time I do it, people leave. So it's kind of weird. So yeah. So that's why I want to start with the suggestions. Okay. Okay. So we're realizing that I've been around with this issue since '87. So my suggestions really look at local community and what can local community do. Also, A, switching the focus from what the police need to what the community needs. Since I've been involved with police brutality cases against people with disability, it's always what the police need. The police need more tasers, more training, more blah, blah, blah. So switching that focus to what the community needs, that's number one. Number two is, and I'm not saying that loved ones should not sue. I'm saying yes, sue. But also we have to realize that the money from these suits are coming from us, the taxpayers. So can you imagine if that money was coming from the police pockets? It would be a total shift. A total shift. Also, we have to be in touch with families that have lost a disabled, a deaf member by police brutality, and really educate these families around disability justice before the lawyers step in. Because once the lawyers step in, their mind shift. So we have to really get in contact with these families before the lawyers step in. Number three, we had to team up with the disabled community, had to team up with Malcolm X Grassroots Center and other black and brown organizations to do reports, studies, and papers on police brutality against brown and black, disabled and deaf people. One thing that I realized is that there's not one report coming from our community, black and brown, disabled people, that look at police brutality against our community. That's wrong. That's totally wrong. Yeah, yes, we have reports from universities, we have reports from, white allies, but we don't have reports coming from our own community. I think the Malcolm X Grassroots Center is a good place where they can team up with black disabled artists to do a report. Number 4, continue to write about police brutality against people with disabilities, especially in the black media and on black Twitter. Black media and black Twitter need to catch up on police brutality against people with disabilities and using disability justice framework to write their articles that could change a lot. So we need to really continue to put out tweets and to really push our black and brown media around how they report police brutality and people with disabilities. Number 5, and this is really important, institutionally, we need to recommend that our disabled organizations take on the issue of police brutality against youth and young adults by offering community forums, training, art and music programs on the topic of state violence. Can you imagine if disabled organizations do that? I think I might be stepping on the edge on this, but I think, being 50 years old, a lot of disabled organizations' services are outdated when it comes to black and brown communities. Can you imagine if, disabled organizations took the lead on police brutality issues and start having, art forms or other kind of programs. Hip Hop Nation, a hip hop international network that I started 11 years ago. We came out with a CD a couple of years ago talking about police brutality and people with disabilities. So we do cultural work on that issue. Number 6 is to make inroads into the NAACP around disability justice. One thing that we know constantly is that after a police brutality case, the NAACP is there. But they don't know anything about disability justice. So we need to make inroads to the NAACP and teach them around disability justice and what that looks like in a police brutality case, and really push them to recognize disability and to say disability in their press releases and their media coverage, because sometimes they don't. A lot of times they don't. Another one, demand that anti-police brutality groups take a workshop on disability justice by Sins Invalid, Patty Byrne, that's doing excellent work around disability justice and intersectionality on the ground. Also a workshop from Poor Magazine that we've been doing for the last, umpteen years of never calling the police. That's a workshop that we do in the Bay Area, and we can, take it anywhere. So we teach people how to never call the police, and that's a whole life-changing situation. So, these organizations need to be called on. Another one is support local activists and organizations who are doing groundbreaking work in police brutality and disability and deaf people, like Idris Kelly Foundation, Lamisha in San Francisco back in the 90s. Her son had mental health disabilities and was shot in the Sony Metron. And since that time, Misha has opened up a foundation to do education work around police brutality and people with disabilities. And Misha came to my organization at the time. I had a nonprofit called Disabled Advocates of Minorities Organization for People of Color. And Misha came and learned about disability justice. So the Idris Kelly Foundation is doing the work in San Francisco. Also, in Chicago, you have the Advanced Youth Leadership Power that Candace does around black youth with disabilities. And they've been on the front lines of the police brutality cases in Chicago, and even protest the DOJ hearings because it didn't include people with disabilities. So these are the people that we should be supporting and looking up to. Another one is using tools that are already out there, like Where is Hope film that Quip Hop and retired cop that's disabled, Emmett Thrower. We did this film together with Misha and Port Magazine that highlights police brutality against people with disabilities. This film is on YouTube. It's easy to see. It's only $3-4. We wanted to make it accessible to our community. So it's not for the Hollywood bling bling. It's for the community. Another one is, as you have seen, I did not mention policy or police reform because it is all about community control. So it's all about going back to your community and making sure that your community is, educated, number one, around disability, and making sure that your neighbor knows about disability, like autism or mental health, so we can have responders that's coming from the community, not the police, so we don't have to call the police. But that takes constantly working with your community, making sure that your community is educated around disability. Can you imagine all the funding that's going on for police training, to have that funding coming back to the community? That would be huge. I talked about this, earlier, but get to know your neighbor and their families, and talk about how they can be more aware of disability in everyday, in crisis situations, so you don't need to call the police. A good example is in Denver, the Paul Childs case that happened, I think it's early 2000s. And Paul Childs was a black youth with autism. He was downstairs in the basement, and the police, and the parents called the police for help because he had a crisis. And the police knew Paul Childs, knew that he was autistic, knew the family had been in the family house for umpteen times, but came in and went downstairs, didn't ask any questions, and shot the young man. The reaction from that shooting is one that should be modeled all over the country, but it's not because people don't know about it. Is that the community got together, and the community's like, no, we don't want more police training. We want to educate everybody in this neighborhood about autism. We want to go to the churches, because the community said that was the problem, is that we had to call you, and we didn't have the option to call our neighbor. So for 2 years, they educate the whole neighborhood about autism. And unfortunately, like all nonprofits, when the funding goes, the bling bling goes. So it lasted for 2 years, but I think that's a wonderful model that needs to be uplifted and in these movements around police brutality. Also, we can demand that these big federal grants that go to national disabled organizations to have real community input, or to say that these national organizations are not doing nothing, so let's get it to local organizations. For example, I interviewed the ARC, which I really, be honest, I don't like what the ARC stands for. The ARC is they still use the term, the R term. It's the Association for Retired Citizens. Well, I interviewed them, and they had this big federal grant to do a whole thing around police brutality and people with disabilities. And I asked them, this is coming down to the last year. I asked them, what have they done? And they said, oh, we done a brochure. I was like, what? It's like, what? You done a brochure? So we really have to question these national organizations and their funding and why that their funding is going to them. Another one is to work with others who are collecting data on this issue to make sure that disability is included. Disability, there are people that are not only included but are a part of the team doing the data research. The group in Chicago is coming out with this data research on collecting data around police brutality and people with disabilities. That's one thing that's totally missing, and that there's no data. As we can see in the U.S., everything is about data. The U.S. Census, nonprofits, everything is about data. So if you don't have data, then you don't have you don't have the control to change it. So we have to really push for more data, and we have to do it locally because, as we know, the federal government under Trump is not going to do it. So we have to really support local organizations that are doing it. This organization in San Francisco is doing it, and we've talked about disability. So that's on the agenda. But we need to really support the organizations and the advocacy that's doing this data collection. And last is to look internationally on police brutality and people with disabilities, because it's not only a U.S. issue, it's happening internationally in Africa, in Cuba, and ask, how are they looking at it and how are they fighting it. So those are the suggestions I have when it comes to police brutality and people with disabilities, because the one thing that I noticed since '89 is that there's only one solution. That keeps on coming down to us constantly, and that's more training. And I have to say, F that. F that. Because I've been hearing that since '89. It's 2018. So, like I said, number one is totally switch the focus from what the police need to what we need. So, yeah. So if anybody, talk about more training. It's like, no, no, no. We've done that. We've been there, done that. It doesn't work. So I'm gonna go on to the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint really discuss the history of state violence against people with disabilities, because it's nothing new. It's so interesting that police brutality is heightened now, and everybody's writing about it, getting grants for it, but really don't know that people with disabilities have been under state violence since we got here. you know. So I want to talk about the history of state violence through this PowerPoint. It's gonna have film, music from hip hop and everything. So the first slide is the title is a historical view, black and disabled under the continuation of a police state. And what it says there is that black disabled bodies from slavery to Jim Crow to the ugly laws to institutionalization to Reaganism to gentrification to disability IDs all equal the police state. Tracking how the state reacted and still reacts to black disabled bodies / minds using poetry, songs, visual image, historical facts, news articles, and lectures. I will take you on a travel through decades ago to today, tracing the harsh reactions that were many times legal toward the black disabled body and mind, debunking the notion that this treatment is new, thus grabbing the roots of how ableism and racism and poverty were always intertwined and how it is playing out today under gentrification in the school to prison pipeline to the height of police brutality. At the end, you will read, and I just read some of my solutions that goes beyond training. So slide two, I'm going to read it and I'm going to play the video. I hope you can see the video. So slide two, the title is The Deaf, Dumb, and Person. So slide two is the historical view, black and disabled under the continuation of police state from slavery. So the film that I'm gonna play for you now is made by Hip Hop co-founder Keith Jones and myself. It's on a beginning of a musical that we're working on entitled Hip Hop Nation: The Crossroad Experience. It's a performance using original music and poetry along the imagery, taking the audience on a fully accessible multimedia journey through experience of being black in a world of disability. So here's the video. I hope you can see it's kind of small.
They sweated in the bows of vessels bound to where they could not imagine. When they saw the sky and smelled the sea, they wept. Where am I? Why, God, are they so cruel? How many days has it been? Why do they keep taking my wife? She doesn't say anything anymore. The air smells different. It's hard to move. We only walk once a day. It's hard to walk with these irons on my feet. These chains have taken my beloved, my son, my family is no more.
So we're still working on the full presentation, but that's the beginning of it. And also on that slide, you see the picture of Harriet Tubman. And like I know most of you know, Harriet Tubman had a disability from her white slave master beat her over the head constantly, and because of that, she had blackouts and seizures, and she used her disability to free other people from slavery. So I'm gonna read what was on the slide. So page 133 to 136 of American Slavery as It Is, a testimony of 1,000 witnesses describe the slave master's views on disability by Theodore Weld of 1839 as follows. Old slaves, they are seen as a tax to the master. It will be in the best interest to shorten their days. The incurable disease and maim. So I'm using their terms from that time. It would be cheaper for masters to buy poison than medicine. The blind, lunatic, and idiots. They are seen as a tax to the master. It will be in the best interest to shorten their days. The deaf, dumb, and persons greatly deformed. Such might or may not be servable to the master. Many of them will be a burden, and many men throw the burdens away. Feeble infants would require much nursing. The time, trouble, and expense necessary to raise them would generally cost more than they would be worth as working animals. This document goes on to estimate of the 1,600 slaves who were deaf, dumb, and in 1,300 blind slaves in 1830. The directors of the American Asylum produced these numbers for the deaf and dumb of Hartford, Connecticut. The continuation of slavery. The experience of disabled slaves during Atkinson, Jim Downs, his book really talks about how free disabled slaves were not free. They were kept on plantations and forced to work where non-disabled black Americans were free. So, slide 3. Slide 3, the same title, and under the same title, it says it started in a cage, Crip Hop track, early entertainment. And you'll see 2 pictures. One is black men in jail, and the other one is Sarah Bartman in a cage, and she was one of the first black disabled women that was exhibited in a cage. So because of this history, Crip Hop did a song called It Started in a Cage. I'm going to play the song right now if I can find the clicker.
Hip hop, sit down and shut up. Crip hop, holy class, pop pop. Before TV, so people came out. We were in cages, lighting up stages. Gave you entertainment. Lights went out, and we were chained up in the basement. The original Dutchess, crippled slaves on ships. Battling each other, talking shit. People came to the Delta to see us moan and holler. With tin cups hanging off guitars. We have come so far, but always are the falling stars. KRS-One laid it out. Hip hop history. From battling to Crip walk, all have roots to disability. Can't stop, won't stop. Talking the truth, hip hop got the blues. Telling stories like Langston Hughes. Blues elders and hip hop sons and daughters have everything to lose. Gave you entertainment. Lights went out. We were chained up in the basement. The original dozens, crippled slaves on ships, battling each other, talking shit. From medicine shows to freak shows, crippled elder dancing, Jim Crow. His dances went on stages, while other crippled niggas were in cages. Black blind musicians quickly aged in the humidity, rain, and snow. Whites only, certain places they could not go. End up like in the tail if they showed any rage. Gave you entertainment. Lights went out and we were chained up in the basement. The original dozens, crippled slaves on ships, battling each other, talking shit. The roots of hip hop, can't stop, won't stop. Like Kunte Kinte, even after his foot was chopped. Crip hop making a connection. After all this raw discrimination, cage, got just sit with it.
From slave ships to blue chips and crooks, they still coming tough to time with contracts and business suits. To steal your youth to reap profits on what I produce. I reduce stereotypical representations of complex individuals. Racism is their residual residue. They cloud your view of what I aspire to. Underscore certain profit. I come to set fire to no better admire than leaders that require my submission. Obtained by force in the beginning, now they complicit. Sugar cane, cotton, and molasses, trading in commodities, including the asses. Giving out to the quadroons, had passes, never detention. By lack of home passes, speak truth, the power, true. But when they bust your applause line, there's a nine clapping back at you. That turner would be a fairy tale that your whole state fantasy. See, it won't be actual physical mortal wounds. It's play with Jerusalem my way. Bonds and ballots, candidates on the new Silk Road where souls are fed, not sold. But lo and behold, it's being foretold. Lie down, get your walk on, stand firmly, patch of terror. Strange shooting scar bearer is but a fraction of original man's spiritual tapestry. These are my final thoughts so that I fought, score some wins alongside the losses. Within this stage, the essence can't be caged.
Lights went out. We were chained up in the basement. The original dozens, crippled slaves on ships, battling each other, talking shit. The roots of hip-hop can't stop, won't stop.
And that's a true story. Chaos once said it, that the dozens came from disabled slaves. They used to separate disabled slaves from the quote-unquote healthy slaves. And the disabled slaves used to spit rhymes at each other. Like, oh, your mother is so fat and blah, blah, blah. So really, hip-hop has the roots of disability going back to the slave ships and how disabled people told stories. So once again, hip-hop is regaining those stories and flipping it on the industry of hip-hop. Because hip-hop has really never included people with disabilities. But we're saying that we've been here since day one. It's not about inclusion, it's about we are hip-hop. So that's most of what on hip-hop songs is about, putting disability back into hip-hop, back into our history, back into our stories. So this one you'll see on the same title, but under the same title is The Real Jim Crow, another hip-hop track. And this page deals with the lynching of Jesse Washington in 1918. Jesse Washington had a disability. To Emmett Till, and as we know, Emmett Till had a disability. To Frederick J. Carter in 2010 in Mississippi, and he had a mental health disability. So I wanted to take the story of Jim Crow, and I've researched this for years and years, because, we got a lot of books that talk about the new Jim Crow, and, the name had been thrown out there, but nobody really talks about the person, the real Jim Crow. And the real Jim Crow was a black disabled elder. And this story has been missed by Michelle Alexander all the way down to a lot of our black scholars. So once again, hip-hop has flipped the story to have the real story of disabled people in history.
Jim Crow, please lift up. You were more than just policy, just dancing in your community, theft of your identity. Some say you were a myth, elder black disabled man just gone poof. White man took your clothes and dance moves to the stages and courtrooms. Institutionalized you, but what happened to you? Your full name, Jim Crow, or some claim Jim Keff. People wrote you were lame. You were an African slave. Your song and dance twisted displayed how blacks behave. People came from far and near to watch and hear as people emulate and got paid, while you, the person in history, fade. Now people speak your name, but not the person. They should be ashamed. Passing down incomplete stories. We will never know the real Jim Crow. This is a black, disabled history. Just like the real Porgy, Jim Crow died in poverty. From minstrel shows to hip-hop shows, the dance inventor, we still don't know. Myths are facts. I will not let you go. Keep on dancing and singing the real Jim Crow. Jim Crow. Jim Crow. Jim Crow. Jim Crow.
Any questions so far? No? I love the story of Jim Crow. We talk about erasure, on the head Tubman collective of black disabled collectives on the internet always talks about that, the erasure of disability. And it's not only the erasure of disability, it's the erasure of history. It's the erasure of lessons. We can learn from Jim Crow. We can learn from disabled slaves, But if we erase it, you don't learn anything from it. And if we use the term overcoming, that doesn't make any sense. It's like overcoming your blackness. It doesn't make sense. So we really have to sit with it and learn from it and be one with it, So this slide, the same title, but underneath it, it goes into the ugly laws in the 13th Amendment. Now, the ugly laws, the book was written by Susan White, a really good friend of mine. Susan White is a professor at UC Berkeley, and she really came to the community when she was researching this book and interviewed disabled scholars like myself, interviewed Poor Magazine, interviewed people that were really on the ground, that had really experienced what back in the day called ugly laws. These ugly laws are still with us today, especially if you're poor and disabled. You'll see it in cities, especially in San Francisco. They are taking out benches so you can't even sit down. If you can't sit down, then your ticket just being there, you know. So the ugly laws from the late 1860s until the 1970s, several American cities had ugly laws making it illegal for persons with what they said unsightly or disgusting disabilities to appear in public. Some of these laws were called unsightly beggar organs. The goal of these laws was seemingly to preserve the quality of life for the community. Similarly, in spirit to current homeowner associations, regulations, and bylaws. The first appearance of the ordinance seen to date to 1846 in San Francisco, where I live in the Bay Area. Chicago was the last to repeal its ugly law as late as 1974. Now, I bring up this because it's continuing to happen, like I said, with a lot of gentrification. You see a lot of city governments just avoiding the ADA. So once again, like I said, taking out benches and putting down anti-homeless art. Anti-homeless art is like spikes coming up from benches, so you can't sit in them. They were testing out one bench. It's not on the market, but you had to pay 50 cents to sit, and after the time was done, the spikes would come up. So yeah, it was really, really disgusting. Now I want to go to the 13th Amendment, and my research is that I found out that the 13th Amendment did not apply to me as a black disabled man. Come to find out that I did research and I found this, that involuntary servitude, when a person is forced to work against his or her will, with little or no control over working conditions, his work might be paid or unpaid. This is called the 13th Amendment. As we know, it prohibited slavery and outlawing involuntary servitude was passed in 1865, shortly before the end of the Civil War. Unfortunately, this protection was not extended to people with developmental disabilities until nearly a century after passing the 13th Amendment. So no wonder you get documentaries like the 13th, and although I like the documentary, it does not speak about people with disabilities. So we have to realize with black scholars, we have to push them and say, no, that's not the full story. The 13th Amendment, the movie, had nothing to say about black disabled people. As we all know, freedom of a slave depended on his or her ability to work. So non-disabled people were promised freedom, while black disabled people were locked up in large, rundown, segregated institutions like mental health hospitals and prisons. And today, with the high rate of black youth in special education, they are caught in the pipeline from school to prison. So when I watch or read documentaries and books like, the new Jim Crow and the 13th Amendment, and I don't see or read in depth about the experience of black disabled people, it makes me shake my head. Like, once again, we're erased by people that have PhDs and should know better. So I wrote this poem called The 13th Amendment, a Black Disabled Poetic Viewpoint. And the poem goes like this. My black disabled ancestors weren't free by a swift of the pen way back then. Black codes, ugly laws, and lynchings, dancing on slave ships, shackles on our feet, shaking our hips, also led many to freedom. Hey, let's talk Representative James Mitchell Ashley and Abraham Lincoln. What happened to your pen back then? What was your definition of involuntary servitude? I don't mean to be rude. Your pen back then separated us by law. Okay, I can understand that was a flaw. In 2017, we are still living your mistake. And it's hard to take. Decades of freak show circus in museums, involuntary entertainment for the public's sake, forced to work against his or her will. Only way to make a buck was to shut up and get back into the cage. As owners took our income was the hardest pill. 13th Amendment wrote into the U.S. Constitution while black disabled people were locked up in rundown state institutions. Today we think that shelter workshops or the Salvation Army are the solution. If it wasn't abuse, it was sub-minimum wage. And we must not show any rage because we weren't free, so could be, again, locked in a cage. Separated, so not mentioned. No wonder black scholars have no comprehension when they write, teach, and create art on the 13th Amendment and the new Jim Crow. We were never the invisible nation. My black disabled ancestors gave my generation the foundation to write books and make art and music inside and outside of Crip Hop Nation. And on this slide you see the cover of the Ugly Laws, and you also see on the bottom of the slide is a police back when the Ugly Laws were in statute, and it says that the police has the right to take you in because you're outside. Okay, so going on to slide 6, same title, and below it's Blues to Black Civil Rights Movement. So we're coming on to resistance. And the pick of Brian Willie Johnson. Brian Willie Johnson was a blues singer. And Brian Willie Johnson had this song called If I Had My Way, I Would Tear Down These Walls. And he was outside of New Orleans City Hall. And one of the stories is that the police took him in because they thought that he was going to start a riot by singing the song. And the song that he sung, he just moaned throughout the song. It's a beautiful song. But once again, the police took him in and arrested him from singing this song. Going down to Cecil Ivory. Cecil Ivory was a freedom fighter. He became disabled in childhood on jumping off a tree and broke his back. But he led counter sit-ins in the South from his wheelchair. And one of the stories that I like so much is that he organized the community. He was the NAACP chairman at the time, black disabled man as a NAACP chairman. And as he walked into the restaurant, he said, "Oh no, I'm not taking a seat from the white people. I have my own seat." His wheelchair. I love that story. But I wanted to show a video of it's a part of what Keith Jones and I is doing on a performance. So this is the poem that I wrote for Cecil Ivory. Ooh. It's hard to see, but I'm going to play only a little bit of it because I know it's hard to see. Okay. I just wanted to play a little of it. The next picture is you see a line of black men holding a sign, "I am a man." And the story of the late Al Hitler, he was a jazz singer back in the 40s and 50s, 60s also. And his songs were sung on protest lines with Martin Luther King. And he was a blind jazz singer, started as a radio DJ. And because he got political size and started marching with Martin Luther King, he was dropped from his label. And the only person that really rescued him and got him another label was Frank Sinatra. Got him on another label. But during a march on April 25th, 1930, while marching with Martin Luther King, during that protest, a cop said to him that, leave this blind person. He's not even worth arresting. So once again, that's how people saw us. He really said there is no use to arrest a blind N-word. He can't make a living anyway. Come to find out that Al Hitler at the time was the highest paid jazz singer. He was making more than the police that was arresting him. And so it's kind of funny. So let's go up now. Yeah. So come to slide 7, same title, but really looking at the school to prison. And you see that picture 1, it should be there, but anyway, picture 1 should be the book of Stephen Noll. And Stephen Noll is the author of Feeble-Minded in Our Midst, Institutions for the Mentally Retarded in the South, 1900 and 1940. And that book is really important, because that book tells you that down south black disabled people ended up in jail, not institutions. So a lot of white disabled people went to institutions, a lot of black disabled people went to jail. Also on that page, you have the picture of the movie that came out in 1999, The Green Mile. If you haven't seen The Green Mile, go see it. I wrote an article back in '99 about how this movie was really true. I got a lot of pushback. A lot of people didn't like the movie because it had a disabled black man. He was a giant, a disabled black man, and his character was an angel, which I thought it was really interesting to put a black giant disabled man as an angel. And he was trying to heal these 2 white babies. And, the family saw this big black giant with these 2 white babies that were dead. And because they saw that, he ended up on death row. And I say that, that this movie is true, So a lot of black authors and scholars didn't like the movie because they thought that it places a black man in a negative light. But the movie was 1920s down south. So, although I can understand the argument, but it's true. So if you ever get a chance to see that movie, The Green Mile, rent it on Netflix, go, see it, and see it as a disabled scholar's, critique about the movie. So, also you have an article that I pulled up called California School Called Police on disabled children a lot more than other children. So once again, there are studies out there that says that schools are calling police on children more than other children. There's also another video that I hope comes out, and this happened in Chicago. No, it happened in Oakland. That an SRO, you'll see it. I'll skip around too. Where did it go? Where did it go? Oh, it's in posting, okay. get the point. You get the point. And the point that I wanted to stress is that SROs in schools started under, I think, Bill Clinton. No, George Bush. I think George Bush. Then Bill Clinton came in office and cut their budget. Then Obama came in office and tripled their budget. So once again, we see a lot of administrations going back and forth with SROs in school, police in schools, and a lot of the funding. That's why I think that a lot of schools has SROs, because it's tied to a lot of funding, so they get a lot of funding from the feds. So I'm almost done. Also on this page you have the picture of a book, which is a gorgeous book, The Pedology of Pathologization. I always get the title mixed up in my mouth, but it's a wonderful book. I think it's one of the first books that talks about black girls with disabilities, with police brutality. So get this book. And also you have Push Out, which I question the author, because the book doesn't include people with disabilities or girls with disabilities. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I know I'm over my time, but really what comes out of this whole presentation is to really question police brutality and the activism against it, and ask yourself why disability is not the center of our activism, of our talking points. Because 70% of all police cases are people with disabilities. The study out there say 50%, but I say it's 70%. If you include all disabilities, not only mental health. If you include autism, all disabilities, it jumps up to 70%. So ask yourself, if people with disabilities are not centered in anti-police brutality work, then, you have to question yourself, what are you doing? But I want to say thank you for having me, and thank you for coming out. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Leroy. One of the things that I noticed about your presentation was how much it's about ancestry. And so I wonder, we have a group of pre-service teachers here, and so I would really love to hear you talk about how important ancestry is in the work that you do and in who you are.
Thank you for that question. History, a lot of authors say if you don't know your history, you can't make your future. And I really believe in that, and I really believe that, my ancestors with disabilities have led us to today, and to not speak about it is damaging. You know, so that's why I always speak about it, I write stories about it, I write poetry about it. I wrote this book that just came out, a children's book, that has a lot of disabled Black ancestries in it. Because being Black and disabled and sitting in these seats when I was younger, I didn't have that. I didn't have that mirror. So it's really important to really twist our history and really pick out the points that have been left behind, you know. Yeah. Any other questions?
I just want to add, in case anybody hasn't seen Leroy's latest book, Black Disabled History 101, it's fantastic. So I highly recommend checking it out.
And that's in the library here as well. Just ordered it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm a teacher in elementary school by day, and I'm just wondering how much of what you're presenting here is being translated not just by your children's book, but by our curriculum that we're required to teach our students. How much of it reflects the history that you brought here today to share with us? Because I think that, and I don't know if you know, but I'm wondering if you do know, and if there is anything in the works policy-wise in school districts, or if there's a model out there for how to make sure that we're covering all our bases and including intersectionality.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. It's very little. You know, although California has a law on the books that's passed a couple of years ago that high schools need to have curriculum that deal with LGBTQ and people with disabilities. Although that's on the books, like most of the laws, it's not enforced. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in that situation because we have the law on the books and there is curriculum, but we need to really enforce it. For my book, Emily and Nicole, who are professors at University of San Francisco, and really pushed for this book to happen. They invited me to be a community scholar teacher in their class for this whole semester. So this whole semester was, you know, the class of students that are going to be special education teachers had to make a toolkit for this book. And we saw some, you know, minds going inside out, really, you know, rethinking about their teaching around disability. So that's one, you know, tool that I hope other schools can take up. And hopefully this toolkit will be done by the end of the summer. Yeah.
Where will that be available?
That's a good question because it's not done. we hope online, you know, we hope at the University of San Francisco website, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Susie. I am a teacher educator. And when you put up the slide that said that Emmett Till had a disability, that blew my mind. I had no idea, and I've taught his story, and so I Googled it real quick to find out. I would love to hear you talk about his story a little bit and why you think the fact of his disability is so commonly erased from any telling of his story. I would really like to hear you talk about that.
talk about it a little bit. I don't want to take more time, but yeah, his story and a lot of people in the Black disabled community knows about the story. His story about Emmett Till is that he had polio and he had a stuttering disability, so he used to stutter a lot. And his mom taught him, the whistle to keep his stuttering down. And, that whistle was the reason why he got lynched, because he whistled at a white lady. So that's a part of, just disability and Black disability history. But a lot of Black scholars don't include that. Matter of fact, I was at the at the Whitney Museum, and I had a chance to perform there. This is after they had this whole uprising about the Emmett Till exhibit, and although I totally was for the protests of having this Caucasian woman do an Emmett Till exhibit, but once again, his disability wasn't there even in that exhibit. So, it's just bringing these stories constantly, especially in these museums, because these museums get, thousands and millions of dollars to build, and they're not including the disability story. The Lynching Museum in Alabama, they had on a story on Oprah, and he's talking about this museum and that one thing about disability. It's like, wow,
Hey, it's Dustin here. So as you're talking about folks' identities being erased, and you also talk about how important it is for us to know who our ancestors were as full people, like as a part of the Harriet Tubman Collective, like some of the things that like we identified as like having a place to exist as a whole person. So when you talk about Emmett Till's disability being erased or Harriet Tubman's, I want to know like what toll does that take on you as somebody that lives at those intersections of being Black and also being disabled, and knowing that there's sometimes that you're fighting for racial justice and you always have to be the person to put disability into it, and then also in the typical disability rights movement, that you're probably the person inserting racial justice into that. So as like a Black disabled person in body and mind, like what toll does that take on you?
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, I think it takes a heavy toll on me, to always have that pushback from our communities and from really like Black scholars, Black male scholars. It's unbelievable how much it takes from me, but also these stories make me energized. And the Al Hitler story makes me energized. Having that opportunity to do the children's book. So it's like little steps like that, keeps me going. Having you out there, Justin, doing your work, because back in the 80s, I swear I felt that I was the only Black disabled person talking about police brutality. So now I see that you are out there, and LT Lewis is out there doing their stuff. So there is progress. I do this presentation, and people's like, God, it's so dark, but there is progress that's being made today. So that what keeps me going, knowing that my niece and nephews know about disability. my niece is a transgender, little girl, and when she was 5, I used to pick her up from school. And one time she looked at me and she's like, Uncle Leroy, I hate police because they mess with you. It's like, wow. My niece sees that. My niece is an advocate for me at age 5. So if my niece could see it, I know, black professors or PhDs can see it, So that what keeps me going,
I'm glad to hear you saying that the children's book you did kept you energized, because I felt it looking at it, not only that it kept you energized, but that you were conveying the way that the artists across the spectrum of music, drama, painting, etc., kept them energized. I heard you mentioning that your next project, or one of your next projects, is a comic strip or a comic book. And I was wondering if you might want to mention, because we just have a couple minutes, something about that, what we should be looking out for.
Yeah, can I mention that? And, as people go, I can play a little music clip that Counterclockwise did around hip hop. This is really, it goes to the resistance of police brutality. But, the comic book that I'm doing with Poor Magazine is a hip-hop comic book. So it's based in New York, and the main character is a brown disabled young woman, and she's in Brooklyn, and she's seeing, gentrification happening, and, she's into hip hop, but she always sees herself, not being included in rallies and stuff like that. And her mother tells her stories about early hip hop in New York. And it flashes back to my days in New York when I used to walk with the walker. I used to walk in the Bronx and see the ciphers going on. And this is when hip hop was on the streets. And a lot of boys and girls used to say, oh, Leroy, you're disabled, you can just look out for the cops, you can't perform. But this young lady that has superpowers every time that she's in a wheelchair, goes back in time to me in the 70s and shows me my future of hip hop. So that's the story.
Well, we have to wrap up, but I want to thank, you join me in thanking Leroy, and I also want to thank all of you. So.
And here's the video.
Hurry up, Kai. Can you drive any faster? Damn, baby, I'm about to go crazy up in this desert. Damn, must you hit every bump in the road? Why you gotta drive like that?
It's a bumpy road.
My pills! Oh, man.
Now what, Deacon?
What they say, leave a whelp on your back with mind control, trying to drown us black. Trying to kill us black, we sold our soul for money and crack. Well, I guess that's it, when his hand over fist, this fight comes. By the cops in the streets, put your hands in cuffs on your knees, begging please. Profile by the beast, if your men ain't pleased, be the street to get beat. And take the screen scream out, toe back at you when you're homie. In the penitentiary, just so the stick can make paper and they couldn't pull a trigger buck down another. Such a cop back for the whip cracks and the invaders shoot. Like a back for the cops attack, hunt this down like rats profiling the blacks. This is for the broke folk that drink and smoke, trying to forget if they can't cope. And all the painkiller addicted cripples getting served by the hospital. Money they dope. If you fit the description, there is no hope, just getting slammed down like a throat. Listen, it's just a modern day lynching, except they use a chair instead of a rope. Over the laugh, they laugh with every crack of the whip, leaving another gas. So bring it back, arm, legs, hip, chest, 5 feet, ears, a fingertip, watch out left. Even up for your back with mind control, trying to drown us back. Trying to kill us black, we sold our soul for money and crack. This game's a trick, I'm going and trick, trying to see you get rich. Well, I guess that's it, when it's hand on this life of this shit. By the cops in the streets, put your hands in cuffs so your knees they can breathe. On fire by the beach, your hand ain't loose, because it's gonna get beat. And you can scream out, toe back at you when you're homie. In the penitentiary, just so the stick can make paper and they quick to pull the trigger buck down another. Handcuffed to the beast, held to the thief. Only thing to meet, chillin' here it is, more grief. While the Illuminati whip and rape the weak, not a lot of thinkers. Snake pyramid, not for the money, for the materialistic rich make the sick. But if you make a stand against the government, they got the nerve to label you a terrorist. Like that. No games for no flesh, stranded alone in the darkness. Full of bullets, all on the cats that you shot in the street. Claiming that they had a gun, but you knew it was a wallet. TV kids on the leash in your mouth and the muzzle. Don't wanna be the front of the barrel. Gotta rebel in the streets of hell, but when you pop and they kill hip-hop. They gon' go in your back with mind control, trying to drive us back. Trying to kill us black, we sold our soul for money and crack. This game's a trip, I'm all in trick, trying to stick and get rich. Well, I guess that's it, when it's hand over fist, this life on this shit. By the cops in the streets, put your hands in cuffs on your knees, beg and please. Profile by the beast, if your skin ain't bleach, be the street to get beat. Out, toe back at you when you're homie. In the penitentiary, just so the stick can make paper and they quickly pull the trigger buck down another. Right, right,
Thank you.